All right, welcome to your personalized deep dive. And this time we're taking a look at Realpolitik.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. We got a whole stack of articles and research that you sent our way.
Oh, cool.
And it looks like you're really interested in this idea of how countries put their own interests in power first.
Yeah, it just seems like sometimes countries make decisions that go against what's considered morally.
Yeah,
You know,
and that's where Realpolitik comes in, right?
it's like they're playing by a different set of rules.
Exactly. So get ready, because today we're going to unpack how this whole philosophy plays out in the real world, the good, the bad, and some pretty shocking examples of it in action.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay, so to kick things off,
Right.
what exactly is Realpolitik?
Well, it's this approach to politics that's all about practicality and getting results.
So less about ideals and more about what actually works.
Right. It's about understanding that the world isn't perfect, and sometimes you have to make tough choices to achieve your goals.
Even if those choices aren't always ethically black and white.
Exactly. It's about seeing the world as it is, not as you wish it would be.
So would you say Realpolitik is kind of like a way to decode why countries act the way they do, even when it seems kind of shady?
That's a great way to put it. It's a lens that helps us understand the motivations behind those actions, even when they seem to go against our own morals.
No, okay, so who's like the poster child for Realpolitik? Someone who really embodies this whole approach?
Well, there's no better example than Otto von Bismarck, the guy who basically created modern Germany.
Ah, Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor. I've heard that name before.
Yeah, he was a master at playing the game of power.
So how did he use Realpolitik to unify Germany? I mean, that's a pretty big accomplishment.
He was incredibly strategic. He used a combination of diplomacy alliances and even a few well-placed wars to maneuver Prussia into the top spot in Europe.
So he wasn't afraid to ruffle some feathers along the way.
Not at all. He understood that power dynamics were constantly shifting, and he was willing to adapt and take advantage of any opportunity that came his way.
Let's talk about some of those specific moves he made. Like, what were some of the key moments where his Realpolitik approach really shined through?
Well, there's the Second Schleswig War in 1864.
Okay, what was that all about?
Bismarck saw a chance to weaken Denmark and expand Prussian influence, so he took it. It was a calculated move to increase their power in the region.
And then just a few years later, he goes and starts the Austro-Prussian War.
Yep. That one was all about eliminating Austria as a rival in the race to unify Germany.
So he basically picked a fight to get what he wanted.
Pretty much. He recognized that Austria was a major obstacle to his vision of a unified Germany under Prussian leadership, so he took them out of the equation strategically and decisively.
And that paved the way for him to finally unify Germany.
Exactly. It was a bold move, but it paid off in the end.
But perhaps his most audacious move was the Franco-Prussian War, right?
Oh, absolutely. That's where his mastery of manipulation really comes into play.
Tell me about it. What went down there?
Well, it all boils down to this thing called the Ems dispatch. Basically, Bismarck took a telegram from the French ambassador and edited it in a way that made it seem like the Prussians had been insulted.
He doctored a message to stir up trouble.
Exactly. He knew it would provoke France into declaring war, which is exactly what he wanted.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
I mean, he was willing to risk a full-blown war based on a fake message.
It was a risky gamble, but it worked. The Franco-Prussian War led to a decisive Prussian victory and finally the unification of Germany under Bismarck's leadership.
So Bismarck achieved his goal, but at what cost? I mean, all those wars and the way he manipulated events, it's kind of hard to stomach.
That's the thing about Realpolitik. It's effective, but it often comes with some serious ethical baggage.
So is Bismarck a hero or a villain?
That's a question that historians are still debating today. He achieved something remarkable, but the methods he used to get there were definitely questionable.
It's like the classic dilemma, do the ends justify the means?
Precisely. And that's one of the things that makes Realpolitik so fascinating and so unsettling. It forces us to confront those tough questions about power ambition and the price of achieving your goals.
So what's the takeaway here for our listener? Why is it important to understand Bismarck and his use of Realpolitik?
Because it helps us understand that the pursuit of power can be a double-edged sword. It can lead to great achievements, but it can also come at a significant cost.
So it's not just a history lesson, it's a cautionary tale.
Exactly. It reminds us that even the most brilliant and successful leaders can make decisions that have far-reaching consequences, both positive and negative.
And that those decisions can be driven by a philosophy that prioritizes results over everything else.
Even morality.
Okay, so we've covered Bismarck and his Realpolitik playbook, but How does this all relate to the world today? I mean, is this something we're still seeing play out on the global stage?
Oh, absolutely. Realpolitik is alive and well in the 21st century. In fact, you could argue that it's more relevant than ever.
Really? So you're saying countries are still making decisions based on these same principles, even in our modern interconnected world?
You bet. From trade wars to geopolitical maneuvering, nations are still prioritizing their own interests, even if it means bending the rules or causing some collateral damage.
This is getting interesting. I'm ready to dive into some of those modern examples.
Okay, then let's move on to the next chapter of our Realpolitik deep dive.
All right, so let's jump into some real-world examples of realpolitik in action today. Where are we seeing those Bismarckian tactics playing out in the 21st century?
Well, one of the most obvious places is the South China Sea.
Ah, yes. China's been making a lot of headlines with their moves in that region.
Exactly, and a lot of what they're doing can be seen through the lens of Realpolitik.
So how so?
Well, think about it. China's been building artificial islands, claiming disputed territories, and basically trying to assert their dominance over the entire South China Sea.
Yeah, and they haven't exactly been shy about it.
Not at all. They're projecting their military might, flexing their economic muscle, and basically saying, this is our backyard, and we're calling the shots.
So it's a classic power play.
Exactly. They're looking at their long-term strategic interests, securing access to valuable resources, establishing themselves as the regional superpower, and they're willing to ruffle some feathers to get there.
Even if it means risking conflict with their neighbors or with the United States.
Realpolitik is all about calculating those risks and deciding that the potential rewards outweigh the potential downsides.
So in this case, China's decided that asserting their control over the South China Sea is worth the risk of escalating tensions in the region.
Precisely. And it's a high-stakes gamble because the South China Sea is a crucial shipping route for global trade.
So China's actions there could have ripple effects around the world.
Absolutely. It's a situation that has a lot of countries watching very closely.
Okay, so that's one example of realpolitik in action. What are some other hotspots where we're seeing this philosophy play out?
Well, let's shift gears and talk about the Middle East. Another region with no shortage of complexity and conflict.
Exactly. The Middle East is a perfect example of how realpolitik often trumps ideology or traditional alliances.
How so?
Well, you see countries in that region constantly making decisions based on their own immediate security needs, even if it means siding with former enemies or abandoning long-held principles.
So it's like the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing.
Exactly. It's all about pragmatism and survival in a region where the balance of power is constantly shifting.
And where there's a lot at stake: oil, natural gas, strategic positioning, religious tensions. I mean, the list goes on.
Right, so countries like Iran, Saudi Arabia, Israel, the United States, they're all jockeying for influence, trying to secure their own interests, and sometimes those interests align in unexpected ways.
So we see these strange bedfellows situations emerging where countries that were once sworn enemies are suddenly finding common ground.
Yep, and that's realpolitik in action. It's about recognizing that the world is a messy place, and sometimes you have to make deals with the devil to get what you need. And sometimes those deals involve overlooking human rights abuses or turning a blind eye to things that would normally be considered unacceptable.
That's the dark side of realpolitik. It often forces us to confront the uncomfortable realities of how power operates in the world.
And to accept that sometimes there are no easy answers.
Exactly. It's about understanding that sometimes the pursuit of national interest can lead to morally ambiguous decisions.
Okay, so we've talked about the South China Sea and the Middle East. What about other areas of the world? Where else are we seeing realpolitik shaping global events?
Well, let's talk about trade for a minute.
Okay, sure. Global trade has been a pretty hot topic lately.
That's because it's another arena where realpolitik is playing a major role. Think about the trade war between the United States and China, for example.
Oh, yeah. That was a pretty intense showdown.
It was a classic example of two superpowers putting their own economic interests first, even if it meant disrupting global markets and causing economic pain for everyone involved.
So it was a case of realpolitik trumping free trade.
Exactly. Both the U.S. and China were willing to play hardball to protect their own industries and workers, even if it meant escalating tensions and jeopardizing the stability of the global economy.
And they both used a lot of rhetoric about national pride and economic patriotism to justify their actions.
Of course, because in realpolitik, appealing to those sentiments is a powerful way to rally public support for your policies.
So it's not just about making calculated moves on the world stage, it's also about shaping the narrative at home.
Absolutely. You need to convince your own people that you're acting in their best interests, even if those actions have negative consequences for other countries or for the global community as a whole.
So realpolitik isn't just about what happens between nations. It's also about how those actions are perceived and justified within those nations.
Exactly. It's a multifaceted game, and understanding those domestic dynamics is crucial to understanding how realpolitik works in the real world.
This is really giving me a new perspective on how international relations play out. It's like I'm seeing behind the curtain and understanding the hidden motivations driving so many global events.
That's the power of understanding realpolitik. It gives you a framework for decoding the often cynical calculations that shape the world around us.
So it's not about judging those actions as inherently good or evil. It's about understanding the forces at play.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that in a world governed by realpolitik, the pursuit of power and security often comes at a cost, and that cost can be quite high.
And that sometimes the lines between right and wrong can get pretty blurry.
Unfortunately, that's often the case. But the more we understand about realpolitik, the better equipped we are to navigate those complexities and make informed decisions about the world we live in.
Wow. It's amazing how these examples from the South China Sea, the Middle East, and global trade really highlight how realpolitik is still shaping the world today.
It really is, and it's not just about understanding the actions of governments and leaders, it's also about understanding our own role as citizens in this complex system.
That's a good point because ultimately these decisions made by world leaders impact all of us.
Exactly, and understanding realpolitik helps us make sense of those decisions and the forces that drive them.
It's like we're lifting the veil and seeing the world through a more realistic, less idealistic lens.
Right. It's about recognizing that self-interest and the pursuit of power are major factors in international relations, whether we like it or not.
And it's about acknowledging that sometimes those pursuits can lead to pretty messy outcomes.
Exactly. It's not always pretty, but it's reality.
So thinking back to Bismarck, I mean, he's a fascinating figure, right? He achieved this incredible feat of unifying Germany.
Oh, absolutely. He was a master strategist.
But he also used some pretty questionable tactics to get there. Wars, manipulation, deception.
Right. That's the double-edged sword of realpolitik. It can be effective, but it often comes with a moral price tag.
So how do we reconcile those two things, his achievements and the methods he used to achieve them?
That's the big question, isn't it? Can we celebrate the ends while also acknowledging the unsavory means?
It's a question that historians and political scientists are still grappling with today.
And it's a question that's relevant to so many current events as well.
Because we're still seeing those same tensions play out between what's effective in terms of achieving national interests and what's ethically justifiable.
Exactly. And realpolitik forces us to confront that tension head on.
So for our listener, what's the key takeaway here? How can understanding realpolitik actually change the way we see the world?
Well, I think it encourages us to be more critical thinkers, to question the narratives that we're often presented with by governments and the media.
So don't just accept things at face value, dig a little deeper.
Right, look beyond the surface and try to understand the underlying motivations and power dynamics at play.
It's like we're developing a new set of lenses, a way to decode the complexities of global events.
Exactly, and that understanding empowers us to engage with the world in a more informed and nuanced way.
It helps us make sense of the often confusing and seemingly contradictory actions of nations.
And it reminds us that even in our interconnected, globalized world, national interests and the pursuit of power still play a major role in shaping events.
So realpolitik is a lens for understanding the world as it is not as we wish it would be.
Precisely, it's a tool for navigating the complexities and moral ambiguities of international relations.
Well, this has been an incredibly insightful deep dive into realpolitik. Thanks for guiding us through this fascinating topic.
It's been my pleasure.
And for our listener, remember, the conversation doesn't end here. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning about the forces that shape our world.
Because the more we understand about those forces, the better equipped we are to create a more just and peaceful future.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Deep Dive. Until next time, keep diving deep.